that the blockbuster Netflix show Adolescence has been causing waves. Now, it's a searing account of a boy sucked into the so-called manosphere, and it covers really important topics about masculinity, violence, and internet culture. Now, I binged it in one go. I thought it was absolutely incredible. Reviewers are calling it a once-in-a-generation show. So why does the right wing decide to ruin it and ruin amazing television by making this all about their imagined culture war? They're getting angry because the main character was a young white boy. Now, yes, working class white boys have been vilified in recent years, and it's only right that we tackle that. But this is a television show, and the right wing weaponizing that to make it all about their agenda of division and hate is completely wrong. But I'm sure the panel will disagree. Why does it always have to be about weaponising culture? It's a television show, Alex.
Really, listen, I was one of those white working class boys who was completely forgotten about by successive governments, and every 100 of me who managed to get out of that cycle are vilified, demonised, and left behind by successive politicians, by successive governments. And quite frankly, to then peddle this nonsense on Netflix when so constantly they are swapping out races, swapping out genders, for this, that and the other, and then to pin it on young white boys is just taking that even farther. What they're trying to do is demonise them as terrorist, misogynistic young men who go out and stab people. The facts do not support what Netflix is portraying. And this is what's enraging so many working class people in this country. Once again, they are at the butt of a joke by the liberal media elite. It's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and I found your tweeting about this actually very powerful. And I agree that white working class boys have been ignored, and actually importing the DEI sort of framework from the US into the UK never worked, because actually class is one of the biggest determinants of life success in this country. We'll talk about that later when we talk about things like private education.
Yep.
I agree with you on that. But there's been plenty of shows showing about drugs and knife crime with black people.
I'm nonsense.
Glad you said that.
There are plenty of those shows.
Can I give you some examples? So Coronation Street did a whole programme on grooming gangs. They were white. Spooks they were hunting down some terrorists. They were from a white evangelical church. Starmer stood up in our parliament this week and called it a documentary. It's not a documentary, it's fiction.
Absolutely.
He actually said it should be shown in schools. Well, why should we show it in schools? Because it's not real events. Perhaps we should show real events, like documentaries about the sexual predators in our society in schools. Well, we have to stop painting our white boys as privileged, but also toxic.
Well, look, I mean, I really do think this is typical liberal elites trying to frame the topic in a way that they can easily talk about, because, let's face it, if they framed this as a young black boy, for example, there'd be outrage, wouldn't there?
Yeah, that wouldn't happen in a million years. And I'd be less worried if this was just yet another example of the liberal media talking down to the white working class. But there are consequences, because we've got a moronic Labor government that are now using this to try and inform policy decisions. They're forcing schools to watch this, they're going to put it on in Parliament, and they're laying the blame at people like Andrew Tate or porn or all the wrong reasons, as opposed to having proper conversations around culture, around ethnicity and around families, which is where the problems lie.
Yes, just a clarification for the audience. Keir Starmer did correct his comments about that being a documentary. But you may argue the damage was already done. Harrison, what's your take on this? You're a young man. What do you think about what's happening to? Yes, yeah, well, exactly. What do you think is happening? Because I don't think you can put this down just to people like Andrew Tate. I think this is because of decades of neglect, and this is going back, 30, 40 years, in my opinion.
Saying Andrew Tate is lazy, right? Yeah. I'll be honest. Some of the stuff he says won't have a positive influence, right? But it's not just TV. I don't remember the horrific events that we saw in Nottingham with that horrific attacker. Yeah. Nottingham's police put a photo on Twitter, a stock image of a white arm being arrested. Right? They then deleted that tweet. It's weird. I mean, it goes both ways. It's if something was, a crime was committed by predominantly white people, and then they got a black person to betray it, I'd find that odd. Yeah. So I think it goes both ways, and I think the point to highlight, white working class boys are, they perform the worst at school, the least likely to go to university, and it's almost like, but they'll be okay. There's so many, plans to go for leadership programs and all this sort of stuff if you're from an ethnic background, if you're a woman, but if you're a white working class lad, there's not much you can actually grapple onto. I agree.